Good evening, everybody. 7:30 on a Wednesday night. That's us at the Quaker Meeting House in Bury St Edmunds for the Bury St Edmunds Meditation and Buddhism group. But I'll be honest with you, it's not actually Wednesday night, it's Sunday afternoon. And I'm coming to you by the technology of the internet and a biomarker's computer. But perhaps you're watching this at 7:30 on Wednesday. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Keep with tradition. Nothing wrong with a bit of tradition. So I'm here again, Jnana Ruchi. I did one of these a few weeks ago now from our shrine room. We're a bit better equipped now. Got our recognisable triptych, give you a sense of the familiar. Broadcasting from one of our bedrooms. If only you could see what's around us. Quite a situation, quite a setup. You're lucky people. So this is the last in our series on how to live your life. So this is the 7th week, I think, and this one has been entitled Prapanca. So I don't know if that means much to you, but I'll say it again. Prapanca. I'll come around to what that means now. So yesterday, I was having a nice relaxing Saturday afternoon off, and I went for a bicycle ride. Travelling the back streets of Walston-le-Willows, Stanton, all these delightful places in the countryside of Suffolk, and I came across a lovely lake, possibly one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And as I settled myself down there, the grass gently descending into the water, the still water, the beautiful golden sunlight reflecting off the calm waters of the lake into these very eyes, ladies and gentlemen. I hear the sounds of ducks, or see the ducks. I could see these sort of little cloud of midges over the water, but didn't have anything to do with me, so they were just quite delightful to watch. I saw a heron fly in and land on one of the trees. And I was quite awestruck in a way of what a lovely situation it was. And I sat there for a few minutes, just taking it all in. And then I looked at one of the ducks. Quack, quack, quack. That's a duck, not me getting mad. I looked at one of the ducks and it reminded me of the pond we have here at Vidrasana. And I started thinking about the ducks in the pond and how last year we fed them every day. They became tamer and tamer until Sadhketu had a little chick. I don't know which side of the screen my hand's on. A little chick would stand on his hand to eat the porridge oats we gave him every morning. It was delightful, actually. Then I started thinking about Sadhketu, what he was up to this weekend. I started thinking about how I might spend the rest of the weekend. And I started thinking about what I might do this evening. Talk to my delightful girlfriend on the telephone. Maybe we'll watch a film. And then, of course, I realised, hold on, I'm sitting here in the most beautiful place I've ever seen. The beautiful lake, with the sunlight and the birds. I've told you all this. But I had forgotten it because I was caught up in my own thinking. What on earth was that about? So I sort of thought, okay, just come back to the lake. So I came back to the lake. And then I was off again, thinking about something else. I don't know how I'd got there on my bike or whatever it might be. And I realised it was quite an unpleasant situation, just not being able to dwell in my current experience at this beautiful lake, just happily absorbing what was going on. I'll come to the solutions later on, perhaps. But perhaps you've had this experience yourself when you're attending to something and your mind wanders off into all sorts of different things. And so the Buddha had a word for this. He called it Prapanca. So, what is Prapanca? Prapanca is a tricky word to translate. Different translators of Buddhist texts have used quite different words. Here's a few of them. I've written them down so I don't forget. Rumination, obsession, diversification. It also kind of has sort of notions of sort of the vague wanderings of the mind, and it separates us from what's really going on. But perhaps the best term that could be used for this is mental proliferation. So it's where the activities of our mind just proliferate out, going in all sorts of directions, largely uncontrollably. And this meaning is hinted at in the word itself. Prapanca, panch, in Pali, the language that the earliest Buddhist scriptures are written in, means a hand. So there's a sense of a sort of spreading out into different, well, possibly it means 5. I've forgotten now. Anyway, it means hand or 5, possibly both. But the connotation is of something spreading out from a central core and moving away from where you were at the beginning. So mental proliferation. Now, this isn't a terrible thing, is it? This isn't wholly, deeply unethical or anything like that, or in a way doesn't get us in the way of living our life that much, we may think. But it can cause a sort of consternation, and it does cause a background restlessness, I think, in our thinking and our minds, where we are often caught up in just thinking about something other than what we want to be doing. And the sequence of events that creates Prapanca, it can go a little bit further into a much more complicated term, Prapanca Sanya Sankar, which means we end up inhabiting views which are actually quite far away from the reality of where we started. I'll come back to this in a minute, but it can cause the Prapanca Sanya Sankar can cause an awful lot of suffering. And the reason I'm talking about this in this series, How to Live Your Life, is because this Prapanca and various associated mental states actually, well, it creates our life. It makes our life for us quite often. And that creation and making of our life is often, I would suggest, or I'm going to suggest, not quite as we would like. Okay, so the Buddha often taught in lists and sequences of events and causes and conditions. So I'm going to run through now this sequence of events and the conditions that cause Prapanca. So first of all, hopefully, you will see my rather snazzy 1980s looking chain of conditions that cause Prapanca. So, first of all, I've got all these little post-it notes here that are hopefully going to run in the same sequence as the slides. If Salakoti can very helpfully edit it together for me, we shall see. So, how does a Prapanca arise? Prapanca arises on the basis, initially, of sense contact. So what's the sense contact? Sense contact is anything that our senses come into relation with. So it may be something we see, like me looking at the computer right now, something we feel with our bodily sense, so say the temperature of the floor one's feet are on, maybe something we hear, like me listening to the bird song at this lake, smells, tastes, you get the picture. And in Buddhism, the mind is also a sense, so it's any image or thought that might come to mind as well. That can be a sense contact. So, Buddha says, on the arising of a sense contact, there will be a feeling. So feeling in this sense has quite a specific meaning. It means a automatic, unthought through response to the sense contact, which is either one of pleasure, displeasure, or something neutral in between. So say we see an apple, we may see something, then immediately there'll be a sense of a subtle sense of pleasure of seeing an apple. If we see something like a dead animal on the side of the road, we'll see it, sense contact on the eyes, and there'll be a sense, more or less subtle, I guess, of displeasure or something of unpleasant, something being unpleasant. Something being neutral, neither of those things is just, say, looking at a wall, probably doesn't arouse any particular hedonic response in us. So on the basis of our feeling, then what arises next? Perception. So this can have a range of meanings, but particularly at this level, it just means a gentle labelling. So sense contact to the apple, we find it pleasant, then the word or the label will come to our mind, apple. Maybe other things will arise as well at that point, red, round, some of these very sort of basic descriptors of how we experience the world. So on the basis of perception, which again just automatically arises, it's part of our psychic or mental makeup. There's nothing we can really do about it, particularly not in the moment. That's with the same of feeling. These things just happen. They are viparkas, they are fruits of previous action. On the basis of perception, thinking arises. Now, something different's happened here. So, sense, contact, feeling and perception, they've really happened without us doing anything. They just arise constantly on the basis of us being in the world. And thinking has a slightly different connotation. Thinking does have an intentional element. So once we take up or we see this thing, we find it pleasant, it's red and round, and we label it as an apple. Then we start thinking about it. So we may think, oh, I'd like to eat that apple. See, an intention or a volition may come out of that. I'd like to eat the apple. In the case of a dead animal, say, or something else unpleasant, can't think of a more pleasant, unpleasant situation, I'm afraid. We may think, what's that doing there? Why hasn't someone cleared it up? Something like this. I would like to move away from it. So thinking sort of starts off on this quite basic level. Thinking in a way can be ethical or unethical. So maybe I'll come to that. So if we start thinking about something for a while, and we start to mentally proliferate about this, we start to come into... before we get there. So we're thinking about something, and then if this sort of starts to activate, say, some of our particular issues, complexes, basic human drives, which we'll call here latent tendencies, this will so our sort of preconditioned psychic character may feed on what we're thinking, and then our new friend Prapanca will arise. So Prapanca is where, as I said, it's mental proliferation, rumination. It's where now we start thinking without much thought. So awareness, to some extent, is starting to be lost here. And this will be unskillful, unethical. So Prapanca is never an ethical mental state. It's subtly unethical if we're just lost in thinking. It's probably not going to do anything terrible to the world. But it is subtly unethical. It's probably a habitual action that we're recreating. And it is, when you do become aware of it, as I did at the lake, you suddenly realise, this isn't actually very pleasant. I'm just stuck in this kind of thinking. If this carries on, the Prapanca, and it becomes a bit more self-orientated perhaps, something new will arise out of that. Prapanca Sanya Sankar. Now, this is quite a complicated sounding word, isn't it? So, what I think this means is the mental proliferation of perceptual formations. That would be a kind of direct word-for-word translation. Or ruminating on the labelled volitions of the mind or something like that. It's where the mind now is just going kind of hell for leather, if you like. We've lost complete awareness. Our latent tendencies have fed into this. We've created a whole sort of constructed world that is completely far away from our basic original sense experience. So interestingly, in the sutta, so the discourse where the Buddha gives this teaching, is called the Discourse on the Ball of Honey. So it's as if now we've got stuck into this. Let's should my hand go. I'll hold the Buddha's bowl. It's like a ball of honey, doesn't it? We've got this sticky, messy ball that we can't sort of get ourselves out of very easily. Prapanca sankar. And some people have translated as mentally constructed secondary reality. Again, a bit of a mouthful, and I don't have a slide for that, I'm afraid. But what that's sort of standing in distinction to is our basic sense contact, the feeling, the perception, which you could say are kind of, just how sort of reality tends to look to us. So we see the red, we see something, we have a slight sort of sense of pleasantness around it. It's red, it's round, has a sweet smell to it, crunchy and sweet texture, and it's an apple. All of that is pretty close to the sort of what you may say, or what you'll probably get the closest to, is objective reality. It's kind of quite primary. It's our primary experience, if you like. When we get to Prapanca sankar, we kind of lost it with the apple's gone out the window. So we probably won't get into this state from looking at an apple. It's not exciting enough for us. It probably won't activate our latent tendencies. So this whole chain of conditions will probably die out or get overtaken by something else if we've just taken an apple as our primary sense contact. However, I've got another example, one that perhaps would have happened to you or maybe a friend, I don't know. So imagine back in the mists of time, maybe for some of us, where we may have gone out on a date, where we've met someone that we like, or someone's hooked us up once, or something like this. We may have gone on a date, it's gone quite well. We had a pleasant evening out, before the lockdown this is, obviously. We're not allowed to go out anymore, so I don't know how one goes about dating. But anyway, I digress. See, I'm perpanturing in front of you, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies. So we've gone out on this date with a nice person. We feel there's a bit of chemistry there. It gets to the end of the evening, not too late, I'm sure. We exchange telephone numbers and we say, yes, it would be nice to see you again. I'll be in touch. Okay, jolly good. Maybe a kiss on the cheek. Bye. Have a pleasant night. Thanks very much. So, that's nice, isn't it? So what happens? You go home the next day, you're pretty happy, jolly good. Look at your phone, don't you? No, I haven't got my phone here. That's the phone. No messages. It's fine, it's only a day. Next day goes past, so the second day, you look at your phone, imaginary phone, nothing there. It's okay, just being cool. Third day comes, you look at your phone. So what have we got there? Phone, sense contact, yeah? Black, glassy screen. Immediately, a sense of displeasure or unpleasantness. We label this as phone, no message. That's the label that we perceive. Phone, no message. And we start thinking, gosh, it's been 2-3 days now since that date, and they haven't sent me a message. That's okay, isn't it? That sort of seems reasonable. That's just thinking. And then, of course, our latent tendencies come in. A feeling maybe a bit of insecurity, or maybe we've been single for a while, a bit of loneliness maybe, and it sort of feeds on us. We sort of think, hold on, it's been 3 days now, and this person hasn't texted me. They said they enjoyed my company. I wonder if they meant that. I wonder, maybe they. And can you see now we're moving away from thinking, and I'm moving into Prapanca. And as that builds and builds, maybe we look at our phone again, and the whole thing sort of starts off again. we end up getting stuck in this Prapanca, Sanya, Sankar. So now we can't really stop ourselves. We've completely lost awareness of the fact we are thinking. We're now stuck in this world that I had a nice time with someone. They're not texting me. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I'm a terrible person. They don't like me. They were laughing at me or something, or lying to me the whole time. And we've completely lost track of what's going on. Whereas actually, what actually happened in reality is that we just looked at our phone. Yeah? And through this series of events, we've caused ourselves to get stuck in this mentally constructed secondary reality where the person doesn't like me, I'm worthless. If they do text me now, I'm going to be flippant and offhand with them because they've upset me or whatever it is. So this Prapanca Sanya Sankara, it's quite sort of self-referential, it's deeply unpleasant, and it creates a sort of mini world view which we get locked in. Interestingly, this Prapanca Sanya Sankara can then become the basis of a new sense contact, and the whole thing just goes around again, reinforces it, and we get stuck in this vicious circle or spiral down of, well, whatever it may be. So maybe that's never happened to you. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. We're all a bunch of healthy individuals here who no attachment issues. Maybe. So it may happen in other ways. So we're on our way to a reasonably important meeting. What happens here? So we leave the house at the right time, 8 o'clock in the morning, got to be there at 9 o'clock. And the bus starts to run late. The bus doesn't come on time. Then the bus runs late. Should be there at 8:45. It's now 8:40, and we look at our watch. I'm not even wearing a watch. I haven't prepared very well, have I? I look at my imaginary watch. I've got a sense contact, 8:50. And I think, oh gosh, I have a feeling of, my heart sinks, a feeling of displeasure. I perceive the time as 8:50. I start thinking, oh gosh, I'm about to be late. And then I start thinking, so the perception is going to be late, quite basic kind of labelling of experience. And then the thinking comes in, oh gosh, I could have got up earlier, got an earlier bus. That's kind of reasonable enough, that sort of thinking, isn't it? I wonder how the person is going to be when I eventually get there. Again, that's fair enough. Then the Prapanca starts a bit, or our latent tendencies come in. Oh gosh, what will it, maybe again, a slight sense of insecurity in my job, or am I doing a good enough job, something like this, or maybe I've been late once before. So I start thinking, oh gosh, what's this person going to think about me? Then I start Prapancaing about it, if you like, making a new verb up, Prapancaing. So I start thinking, oh gosh, I really could have got up early. Why did I do this? And then as soon as we get into this kind of like slightly sort of area that might involve shoulds, something like this, self-questioning, repetitive thinking, we've gone now, we're lost in a sea of Prapanca Sanya Sankara. We're thinking, my boss, whoever it is I'm having a meeting with, they're never going to forgive me. They're going to think I'm always late. They're not going to like what I've got to say in the meeting. Will I ever get there? Maybe the bus is going to be even later. Oh gosh, I'll probably lose my job. So all of this, again, just from the base reality of looking like we're going to be 5 minutes late for a meeting, has set us off on this chain of events to where we've got lost in this world of feeling worthless and jobless, and your boss hates you. And what's probably going to happen, you're probably going to get there 5 minutes late, walk through the office door, and your boss will be standing there making a cup of tea, saying, oh hello, just in time for a cup of tea, and they won't even have noticed. In the previous example, that afternoon, the person will probably text you saying, oh hello, sorry I've lost my phone for an hour, or I don't know, had a busy meeting myself, and I'm sorry I haven't texted you for a couple of days, but I really enjoyed our time together. Would you like to go out tomorrow night? Something like this. So, you just don't know. This Prapanca Sanya Sankara is so kind of like different to how things probably turn out that, it's just not worth going into. More current example, perhaps. We're in the lockdown, aren't we? In the lockdown. Hopefully most of you are having a reasonable lockdown. Some people, I'm sure, particularly if you're in a smaller house or a flat, it may be more tricky if you've got less space. And you'll get this thing where, I don't know, you may look out of your window, see the same view, or you may look at your door, so you have a sense impression, a sense contact of looking out the window, looking at the door. Feeling of unpleasantness or displeasure may arise. Then you'll label it as not being outside, not being out of the flat. You start thinking, oh gosh, I'm still in this flat, I'm still in the house, haven't been outside for a few days. Again, that's sort of reasonable, that's fairly objective, that sort of thinking, isn't it? And you know, you've built up some tendencies now of already feeling slightly stuck perhaps in the flat. That feeds into your thinking. You start thinking, gosh, am I ever going to get out of this flat? Maybe I'll be stuck here forever. And can you see we've gone straight from some sort of semblance of objective to reality into being lost in thinking that we're going to be stuck here forever. It's going to be terrible. I'm probably going to go bonkers. And we're stuck in this mentally constructed secondary reality of Prapanca, Sanya, Sankar. Okay, so not much fun, is it? So me just sitting there looking at this beautiful lake, having a bit of a think about things, you know, if you let it really go, it has the opportunity or the potential to cause ourselves some deep suffering, if you like. And I think it's just helpful and it's interesting to know how the Buddha talked about this, and the mere fact that the Buddha did talk about this sort of thing. So it was obviously a very real problem in ancient India, as it is today, possibly with less mobile phones and going on dates in ancient India, but who knows. So what can we do? Well, we can do something. That's the most important thing. We don't have to be a slave or a victim of this sort of thing. We can do something. And I'm going to suggest there's 3 things we can do. We can use our body as an anchor to our own experience to get us out of the trap of thinking. We can use our own pleasant experience as a way of bringing us back to something closer to reality. And we can try to see the real nature of these arising mental states on their own terms as well, which would take the energy out of everything. Okay, so first of all, mindfulness of the body. So what we can do, if we find ourselves getting stuck in this chain of Prapanca, Sanya, Sankar, we need to come back to something our basic primary experience. And what is that? It's mindfulness of the body. Particularly the most obvious physical sensations we can come to. So I'd suggest if we find ourselves stuck in too much thinking, which is basically what this is, too much thinking, can feel our bottoms on the chairs. Our bottom on the chair, our feet on the floor if we're walking. Put our hands on our tummy as we sit, and just to sort of really get a really good sense of something physical. So coming back in this to our sense contact, you know, we don't have to worry too much about what the feeling tone is there, and we'll just perceive it as being bottom on chair or feet on floor, and then we pay attention to that again and again and again, and what will happen? The later links from thinking onwards, they just won't be able to arise because we'll get stuck. We will settle ourselves in a new feedback loop. We won't drift off into thinking. And so if we don't drift off into thinking, we can't drift off into Prapanca or anything else. So we stay grounded in the body. That's one way of working with this sort of thing. Probably the easiest for most of us. The second one, this might work on the basis of grounding ourselves in the body, or can work on our own. We can be mindful of a pleasant experience. So being mindful of a pleasant experience. So we can do that in the body, if we're just sort of somewhere out and about. So if we can sit quietly, can I feel any pleasant sensations in my body right now? So I can feel a sense of gentle energy in my chest, buzziness, energy in my hands. As I just sit here quietly now, I can feel my shoulders relax, which is pleasant. And now my belly relax. So I can just keep bringing my attention to a pleasant sensation. Coming back again and again to a pleasant sensation. If we find it hard to find pleasant sensation in the body, and it took me quite a long time to be able to do that actually, sense of, developing a sense of metta helps this sort of thing, just spending more time tuning into the body and having a background sense of our the Vedana or the feeling of our body. But if we haven't, if we're not that skilled at that, we could do something else. So we could go and look at something attractive or beautiful, listen to some music. Worst comes to the worst, if you're feeling really bad, get yourself out of this Prapanca Sanya Sankar thing. You can even eat some chocolate or have a bath, just a way of changing your current situation, putting some pleasantness into your experience. So, again, if we stay in a feedback loop of pleasant experience and perception, or mindfulness of pleasant experience and perception, well, gradually the thinking will die down, the Prapanca won't be able to arise, and the world selfish or self-referential, unpleasant worldview that we've created, that won't have a chance to arise either. So, that's good, isn't it? So we've looked at sort of just getting outside of our thinking process a little bit. Now I'd say that this is kind of how often we view things in possibly CBT type therapies or mindfulness-based approaches to therapy as well. And they can be very, very useful. But they are, it could be argued, not particularly Buddhist. And there's another way of working with this that I would say is a bit more fully in line with the Dharma, or particularly Buddhist or Dharmic. And that's where we start to see these links themselves as not wholly existing in the way we normally think of them. So we tend to fully identify with our sense experience, with our sense contact. So when we see the apple, see the object on the table, we take it as being real, us as being real, if you like, or self-existent, and the perceptual situation as being ultimately real. Then we have this feeling of pleasantness towards this object. Then when we perceive it as being red, round, sweet smelling, and an apple. And all of this we just take for granted as being real, solid, permanent. And that's not quite the case. So all of these experiences are impermanent, for example, and when we look at them closely, we can start to have a sense, if we're delicate in our awareness, of how they sort of arise from conditions that are not dependent on anything existing permanently, particularly our responses. So we can get a sense of this as if we look around, we see lots of different things, don't we? None of those sense contacts, if you like, exist forever. They're constantly changing. So in one sense, we don't need to take them that seriously. In another sense, it would be foolish to ignore them. They don't not exist at the same time. But we can have a certain lightness to how we perceive things. Now, how we can do this in relation to Prapanca Sanya Sankar, and this will work particularly if it's more an emotion that's coming out of some sort of aversion, say we feel threatened or we're angry or irritated, rather than something that's built on us wanting or craving something. But if we find ourselves getting het up, anger's a classic one, so someone said something to us, we've had a bit of an argument, someone said something to us, that's the sense contact. We've immediately felt it to be unpleasant. We've perceived it as aggressive or threatening. We've started thinking about it. Oh, that person said this to me, that's unkind, unfair. Then we get slightly stuck in it, we Prapanca about it, and our latent tendencies come in. And then after that sort of stuff goes on for a while, we get stuck in this this mini worldview of this person's terrible, they think I'm terrible, I hate them, they're always wrong, I'm always right, this is going to be how it is forever. And of course that's often not the case, is it? But we can't, at that moment, we can't really see out of it. So what we can do here is something called the reaction practice. So what we try to do in reaction practice is we'll sit down quietly, particularly for one of these emotions like aversion or being threatened, as I said, or anger. And what we don't want to do is just suppress it, because then it will just go sort of underground and come out somewhere else emotionally. But we don't want to indulge it at the same time, so we need to deal with it. But we don't want to deal with it by getting stuck in thinking. So what we try to do, we sit ourselves down, and we can feel the bodily experience, so the sense contact, if you like, the feeling and the perception of what's going on, and we tune into that, and we try and drop the story of what's going on. So we drop the mental narrative of whatever it may be. He said this, they said that, I said this back to them. And we just feel the emotion in the body. So, and maybe the sense of awareness it brings as well. In the meditation I'll be guiding us through this week, I'll go into this in a bit more detail. But so we just try to feel in the body, and if it's anger, quite often for me anyway, that'll be a sense of tightness and energy in the chest, and a narrowing of my awareness. Instead of being sort of broad and relaxed, I'll have this energy in the chest, quite a sort of gritty, restless energy in the chest, quite tight. My thinking will be tight. I'll be definitely thinking about the issue at hand, this argument. And my awareness will be tight, just purely tied up in this sort of mental narrative and replaying the argument and this sort of thing. So what I'll need to do is just try and calm down the mind, drop into the body, do a bit of mindfulness of the body first perhaps, and then tune into the physical sensations of the body. So we're not trying to escape our experience here, but we're not indulging it. So we tune into the unpleasant experiences in the body, and then if we can do that without the thinking process going on too much, or keep coming out of the thinking back into the body, we can see how that what has arisen keeps arising and passing away. So those bodily sensations will keep sort of popping into and out of existence as we go back to our thinking, down to our body. We'll see that they're not ultimately real, they're not ultimately existing, they don't last forever. And in a way, they're kind of arising without us having to do very much. So it's just us, our response is just arising out of the conditions. So on the basis of that, our sense contact is actually empty of anything that's permanent and essentially us. It's not really us, is it? We're not always in this state. So we can see that heat in the chest, or whatever it is, narrowness of the awareness, isn't actually us. It's just an aspect of experience. It's empty of something substantial and ultimately real. Now, if we can see that sense contact as being impermanent and empty of a definite sense of us, our feeling will be a lot more fluid as well. Can you see these words now are white on the slides? That's me trying to make them look empty rather than black. On the basis of that, our perceptions will be empty. And then any thinking that does go on, well, hopefully that will get lighter and lighter. And that will also be empty. Now, if our thinking and all the other things are perceived as being empty and not existing in a solid, permanent sense as we used to take them for, there will be nothing for our latent tendencies to attach to. Because our latent tendencies only attach to something that they see as being solid and real. If there's nothing for our latent tendencies to attach to, the other things, Prapanca and Prapanca Sanya Sankar, will not be able to arise. And so we may be left with an unpleasant sort of physical feeling. But that will gradually, as we keep tending to it, not indulging in thinking, just burn itself out. Emotions cannot last forever. And as it burns itself out, we'll feel more relaxed in our body. That burning, hot, restless sensation in our chest will start to die back and cool down, calm down, relax. The thinking will naturally die down of its own. Our awareness will broaden out and soften. Will become calmer. And out of that, a sense of freedom will arise. And if we could do that enough for all of our responses to things, our freedom could be more ultimate than we possibly imagine. So that was reaction practice that I'll go into a bit more in the meditations. Okay, so that's me largely done for this evening or this afternoon, depending on when you are. So we've looked at how from our basic primary experience of sense contact, the sequence of events or conditions or mental arisings can happen. It makes us think about stuff and then overthink, get overly absorbed in a selfish fashion and cause ourselves suffering. And this can happen in lots of ways, probably happens in a way a lot of the time actually. And I've talked about ways of dealing with it, so through coming back to our basic primary experience of being mindful of the body, or trying to get ourselves more absorbed in a pleasant sensation. And then finally I suggested that if we see how all these conditions arise on their own without us having to do very much, we loosen our attachment to them. We don't see them as being definitely us, and that will bring a sense of freedom to the whole situation, which is what we really want, a sense of freedom in life. Okay, so, well, thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to Sadakatu, who's been helping us over the last few weeks with the editing of these videos for everyone. He's done a really good job, putting a lot of time and effort into using a Biovadra's computer to make us look a little bit more professional, possibly. And yeah, so he's been doing a fantastic job in the background of helping us with these, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well. So thanks very much. Over the next few weeks, we'll be, I think Dridakaran's coming next week. We'll be doing a new series on stories from the Buddhist tradition. So come back to YouTube next week for a story from the Buddhist tradition, and watch the accompanying videos on meditation on how to deal with Prapanca from me. Thank you very much. Good night.